Sean and I are going to be talking about Three Body Problem.
This is crunchy, hard science fiction. One of the best adaptations I've seen. It's not your normal sci-fi. It deserves a lot of attention. But people's heads won't explode.
Will kind of got screwed in this one. 3 shots. Goodbye.
Yeah, like what the hell? Huge thing later on down the line when somebody's star becomes important. Weaknesses of the Trisolar.
Where does Jin's boyfriend fall into this?
Don't worry, it'll make sense when you get there. You see God looking down on you. Oh, terrifying.
So for everybody watching Funny Way of Looking today, Sean and I are going to be talking about Three Body Problem. We have both read the books and we have both watched the first series, the first 8 episodes of the Netflix series, Three Body Problem. And we're going to be talking about this. So this episode will be full of spoilers.
This is going to be spoilers.
This is spoilers because we want to go in depth. So if you've seen it and you want to follow along and add some comments, please do. But yeah, we're going to talk about spoilers. And the funny thing about it is, you know, my superpower, right? So the one where I can't actually remember movies and books and things like that.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So just to prep for this, I didn't go back and read the books, but I did do some research, and I'm going like, oh, Luoji, I remember Luoji now, and I remember, you know, Yay, and I remember all these people. It's like, okay, and the goldfish, I remember. So, by the way, just one more time, guys, there will be spoilers in this, so please, if you don't want spoilers, flip away now.
Right. By the way, just so everybody knows, so I knew that Michael hates spoilers, and I told him, I was like, look, I'm going to tell you how this ends. And he's like, don't do it. I was like, I promise you, this ending is so bizarre. There's no way you'll ever see it coming. And you're like, okay, how does it end? And I said, and I just totally drop it on him. I said, it ends with a goldfish that should not be. And he's like, what? And I was like, don't worry, it'll make sense when you get there. And the whole time he's reading the novels, he's like, where's this stupid goldfish? And I'm like, just wait for it.
Exactly.
And you get to the end and the goldfish makes sense.
You know what's interesting? They brought the goldfish in the first episode, maybe second episode. It's there already. And I'm like, the goldfish shouldn't be there yet. But how are they going to play with the goldfish in the future? It's going to have to be a different goldfish unless they freeze it like they did the monkey.
Right. Well, I think the goldfish is more of a metaphor in the first season. I think, I think it's more metaphorical in them nodding because, I mean, talking about this show, I know a lot of people who have watched it, who love the novels, are like, well, they did a lot that's different. And I got to be honest, I really liked everything they did that changed it up.
I like the fact that it's completely different. It is. Yeah. You're watching a brand new show based on something that you know. It's like, we know how Apollo 13 ends, but you know, we got a show out of it. And it's like
right. And the thing that I thought was interesting, and I warned you about this when we talked about the novels, was I said, look, this is crunchy, hard science fiction. This is based as much in real world physics and real world science as it can be, which means that the limitations that we're presenting or that we are presented in these novels are confined by how we understand quantum physics, and so there are going to be issues. And I was like, you know, so be prepared for it to be a little weird when they start explaining things. And I think Xijin Liu does a pretty good job of conveying these concepts in a way that you can grasp. But the characters are a little dry because you're jumping through, well, ostensibly 400 years worth of history, but I mean, to the end of time, really. Trying to explain, you know, humanity, you don't get a lot of characters that you really can identify with. I would say
the one thing that I love about the TV series, I actually like that they broke up people into multiple characters, especially what Luoji, how do you say it?
Luoji,
is what now 5 characters at least, maybe.
Well, I think what they did there with Luoji is like there are some characters who have been broken up and have been given different parts. Like Luoji obviously is Saul, but like there are other characters that have now been brought in and spun off. And I think that's interesting is that they really went out of their way to say, okay, like, we know that all these characters are going to be in the story because the story's finished. But when Xijin Liu was writing it, I don't think they knew if they were going to write a sequel to the three body problem. I don't know if the Dark Forest was a given. Maybe three body problem originally was going to be a standalone.
Yeah. Let's do this. Let's start at the beginning of this whole episode thing. I do have to ask you this technology question, and when we get to it in the
you had a question. Yeah.
I do have a question, and that question is: in the TV series, they have the helmet visor things. Okay, those did not come from Trisolaris or Santi.
Right.
Those were built on Earth. So after the salvage ship was destroyed with the fibers, somebody was still building those things, or they had some just, you know what I mean? Where did those come from? Because somebody on Earth has that technology.
So one thing that is not really conveyed well in the TV show, but it is pretty just straightforward in the novel, is the fact that when they start to introduce the Earth conglomerate that is working with the Trisolarans,
The ETO or EVO, whatever it is.
Yeah, there are different factions. There are, the ETO has different factions within them. There are people in the ETO that are specifically trying to find a way to solve the three body problem. There are people in the ETO who believe that humanity is a plague that needs to be wiped out. And then there are those who are trying to find a way of peaceful coexistence.
That's the other question.
Right.
Peaceful coexistence. The Trisolarans, I just keep calling them that because that's what they are. The Santi.
Yeah. Well, the Santi is what they originally called in the novel. In like the original Chinese novel, the translation into English, they called them Trisolarans. Okay. So they're just using the original Chinese name for them, the Santi. So yeah.
Okay. So what were they just saying? Because
we were talking about the factions of the ETO.
No. Oh my God.
Peaceful coexistence.
Coexistence. There we go. Yep. Coexistence. I think there's a plot hole here because the Trisolarans did not have the intention of wiping out humanity when they started their journey. Their journey was to come and coexist with the humans. And it wasn't until Evans was reading about the big bad wolf that they discovered that we lie and they can't live with liars, basically is what they said.
Right.
Okay. So if you think about that, there was no reason for them to be upset with humans and send the Sophons way back when to be on Earth to take care of us now. In other words, the Sophons didn't need to be here because they were just the Trisolarans were coming to coexist with us, not to wipe us out.
Right. Except, and this is something again that they're not really playing up as much, which is even in the books, they talk about the fact that the Trisolarans don't really understand the concept of lying until a certain way through.
Right.
But we have to remember that they really only discuss the Trisolarans' motivation in the second novel, which is the Dark Forest. And one of the things I love about the Netflix series is that if you're just focusing on that first book, you're not going to have a lot of character growth. You're not going to have a lot of interesting things happening because there's a lot of stuff that really develops in the second and third novel that then kind of illuminates what happens in the first one. Right. Like the ideas are fleshed out. So incorporating things from Death's End and then from the Dark Forest into the series works really well. And one of the things that they really go out of their way to incorporate is the Dark Forest hypothesis, which was originally created from the book, The Dark Forest, which is the sequel to Three Body Problem. Now, that is actually based off of an older scientific theory called the dark jungle. And the dark jungle is essentially a very simple idea, which is if you are in a jungle with a lot of apex predators that are hunting for food, you do not make noise, because if you make noise, they can find you.
Right.
Very simple idea. And so Xi Jinlu applied that idea to space.
Okay.
If you are an interstellar species that has the capability of going out into the stars, there is a chance that there is somebody out there who is more powerful than you. So you want to do everything you can to hide your point of origin and who you are. So that way nobody can find you. So
that was my other question, because the good guy on Trisolaris who was warning Yi not to respond, why would that person on the Trisolaran warn Yi, don't respond because we're going to wipe you out? Because they had no intention of wiping out Earth until Evans read the Big Bad Wolf story.
Yeah, but again, you're assuming that the Trisolarans are being completely opaque about that. Like, you don't know if there's like a second fleet coming. I mean, we know that they have weapons that are with them.
Well, they say that they don't lie, so we have to.
Well, they don't lie, but they always don't say. Like, okay, so I have to reference another book series which has nothing to do with this book series. Have you ever read through the Wheel of Time?
I have not. That's the next thing that I have to get into with my life journey.
Okay, so the Wheel of Time, not to get too far off track, is essentially a gigantic, fantastic fantasy novel series written by an author named Robert Jordan, and he introduces a character. I was about to say character class, like it's D&D. He introduces an institution known as the Aes Sedai, and the Aes Sedai are essentially magic users. They're wizards and sorceresses, and their abilities all have phenomenal, fantastic powers, but they have to take on these rules in order to use their powers. It's kind of like you don't get to learn magic unless you agree to these concepts. And the first concept of becoming an Aes Sedai is you are not allowed to lie. Now, the interesting part is through those novels, and Jordan becomes very adept at doing this, is he demonstrates what is known as an Aes Sedai truth. And an Aes Sedai truth doesn't necessarily mean it's the whole truth. It's kind of like when Obi-Wan Kenobi said Darth Vader killed your father, kind of thing. Like, it's true from a certain point of view. That's how I kind of view what the Trisolarans are doing. Like, they came and they're like, okay, if these people are cool when we get there, we'll let them live. But we're still going. Like, I fully see the Trisolarans as they see people out there who they can come and they can get because they're close enough where they can actually get to Earth before anybody else can discover them. And two, and this is the big one, is if they show up and they have all their tech, they're basically like, we got you. And if you're cool, we're cool with you. But if we don't like you, we're going to smash you like bugs.
They're pretty much doing that.
Yeah, and I think what happened was that on the journey, like, they had prepared for both options, but they did not know what they were going to do. But Earth is too plumb of a planet not to go and get. So they're like, we got to go get this thing. And if we have to kill them to keep it, that's what we'll do. And they decided proactively, you know what? We're just going to have to kill these people.
Okay.
That's how I interpret the way they did it.
So let's do this.
Okay.
What was your first impression? Okay, when you read the three-body problem, when you read it, what was your first impression of it? And has your impression of the book changed now that you're watching the actual TV series?
My first impression of the book was I thought it was a phenomenal concept. I love the fact that it went for the hard science and it didn't try to dance around things like Star Trek does. I mean, Star Trek is so, super advanced. It's practically magic, like, they go, I got to do the thingy with the thingy, and then the thing is going to do the thingy. And whereas the authors who really go out of their way to try to explain how science works, or at least the concepts that we base our principles on, I love when they're able to make that kind of stick. And Shijin Liu did a really good job of doing that. And something I loved about their books, especially Three Body Problem, was because it was written by somebody who was from China, who was fascinated with science and with space. We got to see the idea of space exploration from a completely different cultural point of view. And I really liked that because it was really focused on the Chinese characters. I mean, you had Americans and you had people from Europe, but it was mostly Chinese characters.
I think that was the most brilliant part of the book for me, was actually seeing the world from the Chinese point of view, because as Americans, we don't usually never see that point of view. And just the Cultural Revolution, which didn't it kind of get downplayed with Mao Zedong and like it never happened sort of thing?
Yeah, well, Yeah, the Cultural Revolution, which, if anybody's big into history, you can also look it up. It's called the Great Proletariat Cultural Revolution. It was essentially a movement through the People's Republic of China that was started by Mao, and it basically lasted for about a decade. And the idea was, in order to preserve communism, he wanted to purge all capitalists from Chinese society. And part of that was, if you know too much, then you're a danger to everybody being on the same page. Because communism, at least in Mao's point of view, was all about, we're all on the same footsteps.
Mhm.
And the problem with that is, you have to have people who can innovate. You have to have people who have, you have to allow people to play to their natural strengths. And some people are natural leaders. Some people are natural inventors. Some people are natural orators, and so on and so forth. And scientists were becoming a very powerful political body by accident inside of communist China. And so, yeah, they came down and were very much about, you have to be as hard-lined communist as Mao wants you to be. And if you show even a little bit of forward thinking, we're going to squish you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they did. Mm-hmm.
Actually, now that you say that, isn't that basically what the Trisolarans are doing?
That's exactly what the Trisolarans are doing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. How significant do you think it is that the whole setting of the story went from primarily, I guess, Chinese to more international, especially?
Well, I think it makes sense because you were asking me what are my opinions of the novel after I've seen the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably my thing about the novel now is, I think it's a little too Chinese oriented, because one of the things that Xi Jingliu does, and it really comes more into play in The Dark Forest, and you start getting more international characters in those novels, but is it really does become an international effort to try to fight back against the Trisolarans.
Correct.
So it really is one of those situations where they notice. I mean, I think in the first novel, Wang notices how many people are willing to just work together now. Mm-hmm. And are willing to put aside their differences. And we're talking politically, like we're talking like China is willing to let America come in and help, and they're willing to let the UN come in. And Russia isn't trying to puff up its chest right now. And, South America is like, hey, maybe we need to come and help out. Like, everybody's like, what can we do to help? And all of the stuff that really doesn't matter was starting to slide, because there's now this huge threat that is coming at us. And as a result, we get a very international community of people that try to solve the issues. So I liked that they just made that more clear from the get-go. Yeah. They said, hey, yeah, there's going to be a lot of characters here who are Chinese. And one thing that I personally love that they didn't water down was the fact that they didn't water down Wen Ji at all. Like, they didn't water down Dr. Ye, not even
when she finally listened to Evans say, begging the Lord to please talk, and she was like, "We're screwed." That scene was so powerful.
Oh man, they nailed Ye as a character, because that woman's story is so painful. It is difficult to explain to people unless you've read the book or you've seen the show. But if for some reason you're in this and you have not experienced this story yet, it all centers around a woman who is essentially a child during the proletariat cultural revolution.
Yep, she watches her father get killed, her
father gets stoned to death by a young woman who's not much older than she is.
Right, I think she was actually younger, right? I mean,
yeah, they're the same age, younger, something like that. But her father gets stoned to death, and her mother, who is also a scientist, has to swear and denounce science because, as they very clearly said in the TV show, science doesn't know everything, and therefore leaves the option for God to be an answer. And they're like, that is unacceptable. Humanity is the peak of what we can be. And scientists are like, I can't, discount that. I can't prove it, but I can't discount it either. And they did not like that answer. But her mother had to reject all of this. And so this young woman who never gives up science, who is constantly baffling the Chinese government because she is a loyal communist and is really good at what she does, eventually is put on a top secret project to communicate with space, and discovers a way to make contact and receives a warning. And the warning is simple: don't make another broadcast this way. If you do, we're going to come for you. Do not repeat. Do not respond to our next broadcast.
Yeah.
And she does, because she's determined that on her own that humanity is so broken we cannot fix ourselves, and
Would you have responded to that message? I mean, how could you not respond to that message if you've been looking for life in the universe? It's like,
you're asking a really hard question, because
I see myself sitting at the button and I'm going like, man, do I shoot this message off to the sun or do I let it go? And
when the response is do not respond, we will come for you.
Well, it didn't say we would come for you. It said do not.
We will conquer you. I think it says something like we will conquer you or something like that, I think is the way they put it in the book.
Yeah, but the person sending the message, they made it clear that they were a pacifist and they were giving a warning to Ye, don't do this because someone's going to mess up and come wipe you guys out.
Yep.
So, but then when you're talking from past, and at this point, I don't think she was ready to destroy the world. I think she was still idealistic and was like, my God, here's somebody, we've been looking for this forever and ever. Now there's really people out there. How can you not respond to that? There's like no way in the world I wouldn't be able to not push that button. It's like,
I mean, there's a lot of argument both ways, I think, because scientists in general tend to want to believe the best, like if they're sophisticated enough to come to our planet, to make communication, to do amazing things, they have to have evolved enough past the petty rivalries and the petty crap that would have held them back as a species. But as we know, the Santi/Trisolarans come from a very messed up world where they have three giant gravitational bodies, three suns that are constantly pulling at their planet and are basically slingshotting them around their solar system. And they never know when they're going to be able to have stability. Right. So they're desperate to get off their world. So they don't have that culture of prosperous utopia that would occur because resource-wise they have what they need, and they're just out here being altruistic. It's we gotta get off this place.
I do like the way that Sofan actually was explaining. It's like, look, it took you guys how many tens of thousands of years to go from industrial to from caveman to industrial to agriculture to whatever. It's like 50 years for the computers. If we let you keep growing, you're going to outdo us by the time we get here, basically. And so we got to put a stop to that.
But that's the cool part about the story, is that's the reason why the Santi originally sent the Sophons, is because it's not so much that they want to just obliterate us. It's that they want to have the upper hand when they get here, so they can say, you have to let us live here, because if you are more powerful than us, because you're evolving so fast, you're going to kick our butt and kick us out of the solar system, and we're going to have nowhere to go. And chances are our planet's going to be dead because our planet sucks.
It does. By the way, what did you think when they did the first roll up of the little girl and say, here, throw her back in the water?
It was exactly what I envisioned in my head, and I could not believe they did it. I was like, so okay, guys. So one of the things that doesn't happen in the novel or in the show is we technically never see the aliens. Like, we never see the Santi. Like, they never actually show up. We see representatives, and we see approximations, and we're told what they look like, but we never actually see them. So when they're playing the game, the three-body problem, trying to understand this, it's all from a human perspective. You're given kind of a human vector. So when they have to dehydrate in order to survive whatever apocalyptic, scenario is about to happen on their world, they literally just dry out. They turn into basically just a flat piece of leather.
Yeah.
And all that has to happen. Yeah, and they can roll themselves up, and only one of them has to survive. So they build these giant structures that can basically take atomic blasts, and they put a couple of themselves in there with a ton of food and water, and they say, live here for the next X amount of years until this, era is over, and then come and rehydrate our butts.
Yeah. I guess that's where I guess I didn't even think about this, but that's where the whole saying, if one of us survives, we all survive.
Exactly. If one survives, we all survive. Only one of them has to make it, which is why they have the emperor in the castle. That's because that castle is so fortified, it can't be destroyed no matter what those sons do. They can freeze to death. They can have gravity turned upside down. It doesn't matter because that thing is built out of a mountain. So worst case scenario, they're on the roof. Like when all the people got yeeted out into the atmosphere, that person's just sitting on the roof, like their back's like, this sucks until it's done, and then they go back to doing what they're doing.
By the way, I think that the previews for the TV show, I didn't want to watch it when I saw the previews. I'm like, this just looks stupid to me. I didn't really appreciate because you don't see any real science fiction. You don't get a sense of plot. Then none of the cool stuff that you get when you see, our other science fiction shows, where the things are going to happen and people are going to get destroyed and make happy ending. You don't get that with Three Body Problem. I also think if anyone's reading the books, you at some point you fall into it and you go like, okay, I'm going to finish it because it's actually pretty good. But you have to kind of force yourself through that first book to get to book 2 and 3.
Yeah, because the first book is extremely dense. It's science.
It is.
Because it's about how do we go from the science of the present to even having just a little bit of cool science that's just a little ahead of us now.
Yeah. I actually think that if they can get to a season 2 of this, people will start to get into it. But you got to force yourself almost to get through season 1. And I think if I had not read the books and seen their interpretation for the TV show, I'm not sure if I'd made it through season 1.
Well, I mean, this is probably the biggest challenge of Three Body Problem. As much as people who are into science fiction have embraced this novel, and the fact that Netflix has jumped at this and spent $20 million an episode or something like that. It's insane that they've gone all in on this because honestly, I think it's one of the best adaptations I've seen of source material in quite some time. But you're talking about adapting a very esoteric, science-driven, very philosophical book series that not only has that working against it, it also has working against it that the first novel is basically a downer. There's no real science fiction in it. It's all up here.
Right.
There's nothing there. So when you're showing the preview, like I remember when the trailer came out and Sophon shows up, you're like, how the hell is Sophon here?
Right.
And so I kept calling her Sophon, and my wife was watching it with me. And like the third episode or so, she's like, "Who is Sophon? What is this Sophon person you keep talking about?" And I had to stop and explain what the Sophon was, and then why Sophon is called Sophon. And I'm like, "Is it weird?" Yes, but once they show up, oh man, like it's crazy. It's the closest we get to actually seeing an alien. Like
Tatiana too. I thought at first she was Sophon. She's not. She was just an acolyte.
They jacked her up on steroids or something because she crushed that dude's throat. Like just and actually, no, I think she stabbed him. Did she stab or she crushed his throat? I forget.
I thought she nailed him in the head with something like
she might have
or a knife, whatever it was.
Still held. That was a big boy. She held him up like that. I mean,
right. So I don't know if she had like a Sophon inside her that was giving her super strength, and then I guess
it might have like hit her adrenal.
Erased the video.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something like that. Yeah, like went inside of her adrenal gland and just pumped her up, and she. But
what I don't understand is what's the cop's name that's following everybody that's helping Saul? What's his name?
Yeah, you're talking about my brain.
The Chinese cop.
Why did you just do that? Because I had it in the back of my head and now it's gone. You did this to me. You did this. Dashi.
Okay, so my question is then with Dashi, she's killing him physically in the real world, and he's looking at the window and he doesn't see anything. I don't know how that happened.
Sophon bent light around them so they couldn't see anything.
Okay, I'll go with that. I'll go with that.
I mean, we know they can do that. We know they can bend light. I mean, like that's. I mean, literally, that's what the particle colliders are doing. Is they're moving subatomic particles as fast as possible and then smashing against each other. A lot of that is light. All the Sophon has to do is screw around with the light wave. So you telling me that they can't just kind of make a little, and make it look like nothing's happening?
Well, they did. So I mean, yeah. By the way, if there's one thing that I want to see, please get to season 2, 3. I want to see how they portray the fourth dimension.
Definitely. That's going to be so weird.
Cannot even imagine how they're going to portray that.
Yeah. Yeah. When I said when I said the Sophon was an 11th dimensional computer, my wife was like, "Wait, what?"
Right.
And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Wait, we have 11 dimensions." I was like, "Well, technically, we have 10." I was like, "We know that there are like theoretical ones higher than that." And I was like, "So they're just going one higher?" And she's like, "There's more than our 3 dimensions." I was like, "Well, we know of 4 that we can concretely experience." She's like, "What's the 4th one?" I'm like, "Time."
Yeah.
And she looked at me. She's like, "You're being a smartass." And I'm like, "No, well, you asked the question, you know." Like,
yeah.
I mean, theoretical physics is a wild place. I mean, hell, I was watching Oppenheimer, and when you try to explain to people the idea that all the rules that we understand right now do not work once you break down the physical laws of reality to quantum levels, like people's heads want to explode because they're like, that doesn't make any sense. They're like, well, it does if you know the math. And most people, myself included, are terrible at math.
Yeah,
we're just dog crap at it. Like we're not good at math.
Right, because you don't need to be if you just want to go out and like live in the woods and pee and then eat your food somewhere else.
Right, you know, but if you want to understand calculus, okay, well, here we go. You know, like even though there is a great line in Oppenheimer that talks about I forget who it was, but Oppenheimer was talking to, I think it was a German professor, or maybe it was a British professor, I forget. But he's talking to this guy, and the guy says, he's like, "Oh, I've heard a lot about you. How is your math?" And he goes, "My math isn't that great." And he goes, "Well, do you understand algebra?" He's like, "Understand algebra? Yes. Speak it fluently? No." And the guy comes back with the best line. He goes, "All you need to do is be able to understand the language. You don't have to be fluent, because if you can understand the language, then that means you can read a map. And the map is already in front of us." And I'm kind of like, you know what? That's a really good point.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if you can grasp basic concepts, you don't have to know the rest of it, because the people who are really good at math are the ones who are going to make the proofs to prove that. But if you can read the map, you can intuit where to go next. And there are tons of examples of amateurs who have done that. Have you ever watched the movie Lorenzo's Oil by any chance? You've never seen Lorenzo's Oil?
I never even heard of Lorenzo's Oil.
Okay, so Lorenzo's Oil was a movie that came out in the early 90s, and it's actually based on a real life story of this couple called the O'Dones. But it has Nick Nolte and Susan Sarandon in it. And the very, very short version of it is essentially their son has ALD, which I forget what that stands for. It's this big, long name. And they're told there's no cure for it. There's just no cure. There's no way that they're ever going to be able to save their son from a horribly miserable existence. And this mother, on her own, goes out and just reads everything she can on it and starts to ask people who are smarter than her, "How do I solve this problem?" And they say, "We don't know." And she's like, "What if I did this?" And they say, "Well, nobody would do that." She's like, "But what if we did?" And she kept experimenting and just on her own figured out a way to get to manufacture an oil that would then allow her child to have a normal life. And that's why it's called Lorenzo's Oil, is because it's an oil that she makes. And she saves his life with just persistence. And she's not a scientist. She's like a housewife, I think.
If you think about it, we all start out that way, and then all of a sudden we say, "I am a scientist, I am the expert." But she became the expert because of the study that she did and the experimentation and asking the right questions.
You know, and that's the thing, is that nobody's an expert on something until you go and you try to learn about it, you know, and you ask the questions. You know, people say, "Well, who are you to ask the question?" And the answer is, well, maybe I'm the one who figures it out. Or maybe you're the person who figures out one thing that then leads to a person to figuring it out.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, you stand on the shoulders of giants. You know, that's kind of how humanity works.
Yeah. I got to ask you a question about in the show, Will, the one with pancreatic cancer.
Yes. Oh.
Now,
that was such a great twist. I love that. Yes,
it was. Talk about that, because how many? By the way, how many atomic explosions in the book did he go through before he went off course?
It wasn't the 300. He got through a lot, if I remember correctly. Staircase, he got
2.
It was near the end of Staircase where he flew off in the wrong direction. If I remember correctly, I think they got like 80% of the way there, because he got pretty fast.
Yeah.
And then the last few explosions, I don't know if it was the explosion didn't go off right or his tether broke, but It was near the end of the cycle of the staircase where he got shot off in the wrong direction.
Yeah, Will kind of got screwed in this one. 3 shots, goodbye.
Yeah, like what the hell? But if you remember, he was doing an elliptic in order to, so he was doing a spiral pattern out of the solar system. So while he picked up a lot of speed, he basically, the way I was understanding the line was he was eventually going to go like this out of the solar system. So he was going to go off in this direction, and he got to here and then got shot off. So he's generally going the right way, just not at the speed that he wants to go.
Okay. Well, they're going to pick him up somewhere.
Right.
By the way, I was confused in the book. I don't know if I was confused. I just didn't pay attention. Did they reconstitute his body, or was he living as a brain?
Oh no, they gave him a complete body.
They gave him a body. Okay.
Yeah. Tian Ming, but by the way, can we just talk about for a moment? And again, this is getting into stuff that's like in book 3, quite frankly.
Sofan was in book 3.
Yeah, I think Sofan shows up at the end of book 2. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that shows up early. But again, they're setting up characters and they're setting up storylines. So all the main players that you have through all 3 novels are essentially introduced in this first season.
Yes.
And that was really smart of them, I thought. I thought that was a very, very smart way of doing this.
You know what they didn't do? They didn't set up the wall facer program. I didn't think they didn't set that up.
I thought they set it up fine.
They did, but okay, remember we had the husband-wife, and the wife was already
right, but we don't know about the wall breakers yet. We just know about the wall facers.
The wall face.
We know about the wall facers, not the wall breakers.
True.
We don't know about the.
And they had what, six wall facers before?
There were 4 wall facers. There were 4 in the novel, and there were 4 wall breakers, and then there was 3 in the show.
Okay. For some reason,
if I remember correctly, in the novel, there was the
general.
There was the general. There was the political leader. There was the religious leader, and then there was Luoji. So they had, and Luoji was like their wild card, like science guy,
right? Like Saul.
Right, and so that was how they did it. And so, from what I can tell on this one, they just have the political leader, the general, and then Saul. And they got rid of the religious aspect because they're like, yeah, we don't. If I remember correctly, there was a religious leader.
Yeah, I cannot remember right now. It's been what, a year and a half, 2 years since I read it, at least.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe not that long, but long enough that my little squirrel brain can't remember. But they didn't tell us. I don't remember them saying in the TV series.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't explain to the wall facers, you can't tell anybody what you're thinking. Well,
I
knew she didn't say. She got up on stage, the head of the UN, whoever she was, and said they can't read our minds. But they never told the wall facers, don't say what you want out loud because they'll hear you.
They absolutely said that.
Well,
I think you might have missed that line. She says it in front of everybody because she knows they're watching. She knows they're watching. So she says, she goes through the whole thing of the reason why they're called wall facers is it's based off of the old Buddhist meditation of looking at a wall and getting Zen. And that's because the Trisolarans cannot read our minds. And as such, the wall facers will enact a plan of their own choosing, and they will not tell anybody, and they will be given any latitude that they desire so long as they do not break international law.
I heard, but nobody will. It didn't strike me as her saying, "Don't tell anybody your plan."
Right, and they say, but nobody will know what their plan is because that way the Sophons, or not the Sophons, the Trisolarans can't understand what's going on. So they might be mysterious, they might do something weird, but no matter what they ask, we'll do it because they have a plan.
Okay.
And that was why Luoji was always the wild card, and they wanted him dead, was because they could figure out why the general was there. They could figure out the political leader. They could not figure out why Luoji was there because they're like, that's why the Trisolarans were terrified of him, because they're like, we can see and we can game out. I mean, hell, they even showed the game theory book. Remember the game theory whole story in Dark Forest and whatnot? Even that's introduced in the first season of this is how we outgame the Trisolarans.
Did they have the bugs in the first season where
that was how they ended the novel? Yeah, that's why it's such a. Oh man, when we got to bugs in, I think that was episode 4 or 5.
They started talking about them somewhere around there.
Yeah, but no, when they did the thing where they announced the entire planet, because they did it a little different than in the book. If I remember correctly, in the novel, everybody's eyes have written on their retinas, "You're all bugs. You're all," like every person alive.
Yes,
Saw it all at the same time. It's like, "You're bugs. You're all bugs, and we're going to kill you." Instead, they took over all their technology and they did it that way. But I was describing this to my wife, and she was like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's basically the end of the book." And so Dache is like, "Let me show you something about bugs." And this is like okay, we're totally screwed. And then he was like, "We've been trying to get rid of bugs for as long as we've been around, and we can't do it." And he was like, "That's the problem with bugs. You step on one and there's a million more." And he's like, "We're just going to be bugs."
Yep.
I loved that.
He also, who else was out there? Was it Jen that was out in the forest watching the bugs with Saul? Because in the book, he was all by himself, and then he fell in love with some girl that he had wanted to fall in love with.
Dude, I have no idea how the hell they're going to do the Luo Ji story.
Yeah.
Like, how does Saul translate to Luo Ji? Because Saul is such a down-to-earth guy.
Yes.
And likable. I do not know how that's going to translate to Luo Ji. And I think that's actually a good thing, because in the novel, we know, and by the way, guys, we're talking in half like answers here because we're trying not to give everything away, but they introduce a character in the second book, the person who successfully figures out a plan to actually slow down the Trisolarans. He comes up with this crazy plan, but the way he comes up with it is he basically just does nothing for like a couple of decades. He's just like, "I'm not going to do it."
Yeah.
But he uses the power of the wall facers to do whatever the hell he wants to. And he's so narcissistic. He's like, "I'm going to imagine my dream woman, and I'm going to make the government find them." And they actually find her. And so like he falls in love and he has like a happy life and everything is fantastic. And that's when, once he's at the peak of his happiness, that's when the government says, "Yeah, we took her back and we froze her, and she's going to wake up 400 years from now. So if you want to save your wife and your kid, you better fix this and make sure that the Trisolarans don't kill us all." And that's when he comes up with his plan.
Right.
Like, Luoji's a jerk, man. Like, he is such a jerk.
He is. He's a way bigger jerk than Saul is. Saul just doesn't know what's going on, but Luoji is like gaming the system.
Like, I'm trying to figure out how the hell Saul, like, what is Saul's like motivator? And a part of me thought that maybe they were going to use Augie.
Augie's off filtering water with people. I don't know what she's gonna do.
But if you remember correctly, Augie was basically our stand-in. So in the first novel, this is another problem with the novel, is that Xijin Liu introduces a lot of characters that don't come back in the second books, in the sequel. Wang, who is like their infiltrator agent, he's like their guy, gets into the ETO, like learns about all this stuff, and is like their guy on the inside, and is working with Dache the entire time. And then Wang just disappears. Like, they just give him retirement. Like, what happens to Wang? Like, he just vanishes for the rest of the story. And Augie is essentially the Wang counterpart. She's essentially Wang's analog, for lack of a better term. And I'm like, okay, like, I can see that. So I'm like, well, what are you gonna do with like, you know, Wang's character now? I mean, like,
don't know.
I don't know. I personally saw Wade as a younger character. I saw him as like a smarmy 30-something who knew how to game like all of like the politics. But I gotta be honest, like,
he's nailing it.
He's nailing it. Like, because I was explaining, I was like, the thing I love about Wade is he does exactly what he says he will, which is he will let people die, get murdered. He will give up so much stuff in order to preserve humanity. And
he does that in the book too. And it's like, you think he's the biggest jerk, but it comes out he's right, and he's making the hard decisions,
and he's making the hard calls. And he says, if he says he'll do something, he keeps his word.
Yeah.
You know, and that's of course a huge thing later on down the line when somebody's star who they got from Will becomes important. And that's all we could say, because that's a huge spoiler.
Yeah, we'll let that one go.
We're going to let that one go.
I do love the way they set that up in this first 8 episodes. Matter of fact, they set up the entire rest of the series in the first 8 episodes.
I mean, honestly, they could do the entire show if they had to. They could do the entire next 2 novels probably in 8 to 12 episodes if they had to. I'm pretty sure they could. Now that they've established all the characters, because we got a lot of time jumping that's going to start kicking in because of the suspended animation. So
I just wonder, like, if Netflix gave them a hard, you've got either 2 seasons or 3 seasons to do this, I think they could do the books all in 3 seasons based on the pacing that they had for the first season. I really want to spend some time in the different eras as they go through the, freezing people and unfreezing them.
Yeah, the bunker era and whatnot. Yeah,
I think that they could do it, and they could do it in 2 seasons, but I don't think it would be as good. It would feel rushed.
Well, the only reason I don't think it would feel rushed is we have to remember there's really only 3 eras that we need to focus on, which is the pre-bug era, which is the one that we've basically wrapped up. Then we have the bunker era, which is, okay, they're coming and we're screwed, and they come up with the way of creating world peace. And then you have the not a chaos era, but the era of, okay, we're screwed. What are we going to do?
Right.
And after that, it is a mad dash run to the end. I mean, and remember, a lot of times end, like a good half of that book is the stories, the fairy tales that Will tells Jen to convey the weaknesses of the Trisolarans.
Right. I want to know how he's going to do those. That's going to be brilliant. The whole thing.
Yeah, I think that they could do it in one more season. I think they could, because I mean, they've already set up so much stuff. I mean, staircase is already, done. Mm-hmm. We've established wall facers. Wall breakers won't be difficult to introduce people who are trying to defeat.
400 years in 8 episodes. Maybe if they made the second season 12 to 15 episodes.
Maybe. I mean, if they're doing 15 episodes, that's essentially like 3 seasons. So yeah.
But I mean, there's 15.
Yeah, but I mean, think about it. All the extra characters that they have. I mean, you have you have the Starfleet that goes out and meets the probe, and the probe kills everybody except for the 4 ships that survive, and they get the hell out of there.
Yep.
And then they're just gone. So you have that.
I can't wait to see how they do that. That's going to be amazing.
when the raindrop gets here and everybody thinks it's cool.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot wait. It's going to be so gnarly and nasty and destructive, but also the payoff. Like there are scenes in this that they have to nail. Rolling up the girl like she's jerky and then throwing her into water and show them rehydrate. That had to be dead on. It's perfect.
Yep.
The entire human computer getting launched into the sky because of the gravity simulation going screwy.
It looks a lot better when you watch the show than in the previews. In the previews, it's just like, why?
Yeah, the eye in the sky.
That was good.
I was like, if they don't get the eye in the sky, it's all ruined. Like, they have to nail that, and they did it. And like, it's like you see God looking down on you. Yeah. Oh, terrifying!
It was,
and I was like, they just.
Yep.
So after that, you have 4th dimensional space. That's a huge one. Yep. You have the droplet battle.
Yep. Not really a battle. It's kind of just a droplet wipeout.
Right, the wipeout. And then from that, the only other scenes where I'm like, you have to nail it is the repository of humanity on Pluto.
Yes.
And then
that one's going to be easy though, because that's just CGI. That's all.
Yeah, and then the pocket universe and what happens, with the pocket universe. Yeah. That's what those are like the moment. Those are the beats that they have to hit. Everything else is flexible.
Where does Jen's boyfriend fall into this in the book?
He is going to be the commander of the fleet. That's going to get wiped out. He's the one
that's going to be the kind of turncoat guy, or
I think they're setting him up to either be the guy who's like, no, forward forever, and he gets wiped out because he just refuses to turn, or he's going to be the one who runs with the other like 3 ships. He's going to be the generation ship guy. Yeah. And now the question is he the one who decides to turn around, or because remember, part of them turn around and the other ones keep going.
Right. They turn around.
So do they turn around or do they keep going? Like, is he the one who eventually, in my math, I would have him be the guy who takes the coward's way out and they run, and then decides, no, we have to go back. And they go back. And then, of course, we know what happens when they get back to Earth.
But, he's been so followed by the book up to this point. he seems like he's kind of weak, but he's really just following orders.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what he does.
Yeah. But it's an incredible reimagining of a very dense book that has made it so interesting and so much more human. Mm-hmm. Because again, you're talking about really hard science that is the main thrust of that first novel. The humanity of characters doesn't even show up, and even then, it's pretty thin. Yeah. In the second and third novels. I think by the third novel, when you get to the Death's End, you really finally have the ability to see exactly how he's able to flesh out these characters. But it really takes him 2 novels to develop those couple of characters who are going to make it to the quote unquote end. Yeah. But it's a hard juggling act for him to figure out. And I think they've done a really good job of creating characters that we can follow through the story. And with suspended animation and being able to jump ahead in time, we're able to keep these characters through the whole story now.
I'm waiting for the first time they freeze any of our main characters and they come out in the future. That's going to be cool.
Yeah. I'm also looking forward to seeing the different versions of humans, because that's something that they talk about in the novels, where
and the clothing with all the advertising on them and all that.
Yeah, stuff. The clothing and how they start to like cosmetically change themselves and give themselves weird looking eyes and stuff. And I'm looking forward to future humans. That's going to be wild. So I'm very curious to see that. I'm really looking forward to emoji wear though. Emoji wear. Yeah, I'm here for it.
Yeah,
I think the only problem is if they don't finish this the show. I think people who pick up the books will be okay for the most part, because there's going to be some retread, because they're going to go back. Like the wall facers don't even show up until the second book, but they can get there. It'll be the fact that all their characters that they're looking for, like Augie and Saul and Will, they're not there. They're going to be other characters. Yeah, it's going to be Tian Ming and all these other characters.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So, but
all right, dude. Any final words on Three Body Problem?
Fantastic show. If you haven't watched it, this is the time to go and check it out. We know for a fact that Netflix will absolutely look at the organic rise of a story. And if it continues to gain momentum and people keep telling their friends to watch it, they're going to continue to invest in those kind of products. And this is an original thing, and it's really good, but it's not your normal sci-fi. It is very much a different approach.
There's a lot of cerebral going on here.
Yes.
Do you think people who have listened to or read the books are going to have I think they will, but the question is, will they have a different experience with the TV show than people like you and me that have actually read the books and go like, oh, I see this, I see that. I love how they changed this, that, and the other. What do you think?
Honestly, I think people who have not read the novels have a leg up for the fact that they don't come in with certain preconceptions. They just get to experience it the way we did the novels, which is, okay, I'm just going to sit down. And I honestly think that the show is handling the broad strokes, the beats that create this show or this story in a much more humanistic way. You get a lot better characterization. They spend the time to actually develop characters, which again is going to pay off if they get a second and third season, because all of these main heavies that we need to show up and guide the fleet and make it to Pluto and survive into the pocket universe and all this stuff. They've already established all the characters who are going to be those characters.
Okay. So here's the deal. I have told there's a couple other people that I discuss sci-fi with, and we've got the shows that we agree on that are like the best shows. And I put this one up there right at the top with the other ones that I actually like myself. But I hesitate to tell them to watch these 8 episodes if there's not going to be a season 2, because it's just not fair to stop like in the middle. It's like Westworld. It's like,
well, I mean, at least Westworld got the 3 seasons. I think Westworld had the problem of they needed to start. They saw the writing on the wall and they said, "No, we're too prestige for them to cancel us." And they needed to start wrapping that up.
They did.
They needed to start wrapping that up, and they just kept asking the next question. It's like, no, pull it in, and that's hubris there.
Yeah.
I think if your 3 Body Problem you know that Netflix has a propensity of canceling after second or third seasons.
Yes.
People do not get past their season with Netflix unless you're Stranger Things. And I don't think this is a Stranger Things situation. I think this is probably more of a mid-level hit for them. But it is an expensive show.
It is.
But I think that if they give it just a little bit more rope, I think people will really glob onto it in season 2, because season 2 has like or the Dark Forest has all of the craziness of this is how we stop the aliens.
Right.
This is what happens to our culture as a result of it. This is what happens when we screw up. Like the last episode of season 2, ostensibly, if you're planning this out, would be the Starfleet massacre. I mean, and like the
that's like the We Are Borg episode.
Yeah,
that's what I could see that being.
Yeah, like you end it on that cliffhanger. Yes, you ended on the cliffhanger of they're almost here, like because it was what the probe got there 5 years, 2 years before the rest of the fleet, because it sped up. It wasn't long, but they knew they had a few more years before the rest of the fleet got there.
Earth was getting kind of haughty, and it's like, we got this.
We got this. Yeah. And I was like, but no, I really think that it deserves a lot of attention. All
right, sir. Let's say goodbye to everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Enjoyed the spoilers, and we'll catch you in the future. Bye.
Yes, catch you in the forehead. The forehead. I almost said the forehead.
You did.
I catch you in the forehead. Bye.
Okay, bye, everybody.